as a, just cuts it to pieces. So they put out a kind of a contest and said, does anyone know how to solve this problem? And someone came up with steel belted tires. So if you tear up your tire, you still have these steel belts that you can drive on. Okay? Same thing with I said, where do you think WD-40 came from? He didn't know. Well, it turns out it was invented in 1920, but it was perfected so we could go to the moon, because in zero gravity, we didn't know if lubrication would work. So they worked that out. Miniaturization of little things. Your phones right now are more powerful than the computer that invented the atomic bomb originally. The original computer you could walk into, it was a complete city block, not just long, but in New York City. We have big blocks in New York City. You could literally walk in and change transistors. And your cell phone is so much more powerful than that initial computer, because we've learned to miniaturize everything. And that all came out of, again, going to the moon. Weight is payload, and less weight, the more you can send up there with you. So I said, well, right now, it's absolutely nothing. Do any of you know what graphene is? Okay, well, when you have $10 extra, you need to invest it in a company that's making graphene. Graphene is made out of carbon molecules. By the way, we live in a carbon world. If you were in my ethics class and we got to environmental ethics, that would be really interesting. You could not avoid carbon. Without carbon, we wouldn't exist. Anyway, it's made out of carbon molecules. Graphene is 1 molecule thick. It's 100 times stronger than steel. It instantly dissipates heat and instantly dissipates cold. Wouldn't it be nice to have a garment that was super flexible and you could cool yourself off or you could heat yourself up? 1 molecule thick. Now, of course, that might be a little transparent. We might want to have a few layers on it. Wouldn't it be nice to have cars made out of this material 100 times stronger than steel? We could play bumper cars without having to pay higher insurance. But right now, the problem with graphene is no one knows. The edges of graphene, when it's manufactured, are as sharp as razors, and no one knows how to deal with that yet. But they will. And this is on the atomic level. And this is a product that's just absolutely amazing. If you were to invest in this, it would be just like investing in Intel when Intel first started, or Microsoft when it first started. This is going everywhere. It's called graphene, G-R-A-P-H-E-N-E. And it's because some people sit down and they ask, is this all there is? And they open their minds to it. Now, for most of us, it doesn't matter. Anybody ever been to the moon? It doesn't matter. Anybody going to Mars lately? For most of us, it doesn't matter. But when you put these ideas in a philosopher's mind, I sit there, remember he said about vibrating? And these strings vibrate at different frequencies. And we think that's why there are other dimensions, and we only see 4 because we vibrate. If you check out your atoms, they vibrate at a frequency. All things vibrate at a frequency. So your atoms vibrate at a certain frequency. So do the atoms here. In fact, all the atoms in our 4-dimensional world vibrate at the same frequency. That's how I can sit on this table and not go through it. But what if I could change my vibrations just a little bit? You ever see shadows go by you? I mean, come on, be honest. Or you hear a voice, there's no one there, or they sit up in the corner and watch their operation. And we want to think, well, that can't be real. What if instead of getting in a car and making a 10-hour drive to Chapel Hill, North Carolina, I could just vibrate myself there? In theoretical physics, we call those wormholes, where you can just, what if there's more to it? I mean, that's just the first thought we have. And so what good is string theory? It has the capacity to open knowledge. And maybe at the other end of that knowledge, there's something there that can be very useful. Otherwise, people are just playing. And by the way, I'm always struggling, while this country's gone through a very secular period, there's a lot of people who think God's a mathematician. Math is behind this whole thing, people. It undergirds the whole thing, numbers. But they have to be the right numbers. He ended his conversation saying there's 20 numbers that are crucial for the world to be held together. I'm not promoting, I don't mean it that way, but I am promoting the idea that, it's kind of interesting that the best of our ability, 20 numbers hold the whole place together. And if one of those numbers change, the place isn't held together anymore. And for most of us, it has no effect. And that's not a negative. But for some people, they're beginning to look into that, the deeper things of life, And if they find something there, most of us will benefit from it. Just like we did from subatomic particles and figuring those things out. Atomic energy, there's a great potential there, but only a few people will discover it, but not just a few will benefit from it. So the point of that is metaphysics establishes us both in the Eastern and Western world. What kind of things are really real? And we've discovered things we never knew. Just 40, 50 years ago, it's just taken our whole idea of what's real and turned it upside down. I mean, this is just me. I'm sorry about this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. String theory is at the foundation of your very existence on that level of reality. Nobody knew. The subatomic world, the quantum world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This all has implication for us about what's really real. Now, for you and I in the regular realm of living and whatnot, whatever's real is just what works for us. If it works for you, it works for you. If it doesn't work for you or work for me, it doesn't work for me. But this has major implications. In the Western world, then, we tend to trust reason and experimentation. And that's what this gentleman talked about. This is just this mathematical experimentation, but it's trying to work with something that can be reproduced and reproduced and reproduced to give us some insight into reality. Reality is composed of separate and distinct units of matter. That's how we look at it in the Western world. So we have these 20 numbers. We don't necessarily see the whole picture, but we begin to examine it in its component parts. The individual, therefore, is more important than the group. The English language depends heavily on nouns which express separation and static entities, male, female, night, day, good, bad. All of those are nouns that differentiate between particles or between participants. Therefore, describing an animal scene where you have a large fish among smaller fish, Westerners are more likely to begin with the big fish. And I can't prove that to you, but I know that that's just... From experience, we know that that's the way we've been taught to look at the world. In the Eastern world, they look at the same world, but they assess it differently. They rely on tuition, intuition, and connectedness. Everything is interconnected. The community shapes the individual. We'll study about this when we get to Confucianism. Indigenous or native languages rely on verbs instead of nouns, which convey process and motion and express ways of being in the universe. So in the Eastern world, we talk about yin and yang, how everything is completely interrelated to one another. You can't do without one without having the other. Describing an animated scene where you have a large fish among smaller fish, Easterners are more likely to begin with the background. We call this holistic thinking. They look at the whole picture and then they begin to diagnose the little parts that are it. So on your quiz, you will be asked, what's the difference between the Eastern and Western way of looking at the world? Same world. So their information is just as valid as ours. It just gives us a different look at the world. If we were to combine those two, we might get a complete picture. So I don't want you to disregard one way just because it's kind of foreign to the way we look at things. Okay? So when we answer fundamental questions in the West, reasoning our way to an accurate understanding of reality based on objective principles, we talked about this is foundationalism. That would make the world intelligible on its own terms. This belief in orderliness of the universe and our human ability to understand it is the most important legacy of the pre-Socratics, the people who worked before clockwork science. The world is mechanistic and can be understood in terms of cause and effect. We have metaphysics, ontology, what kind of things are real, material things, non-material things. Epistemology is knowledge. What can we know? Do we use reason, logic, and objectivity, or do we use intuition, insight, or subjectivity? And maybe we shouldn't separate the two at all. So for the rest of the time, I want to talk about Socrates. Socrates is kind of looked at as the progenitor or the founder of Western thinking. He could never ask enough questions. Socrates thought that wisdom was knowing you didn't know very much. Because once you think you know stuff, you quit asking questions. Now, he was very knowledgeable, and he comes out of the Greek experience very knowledgeable. We finally admitted that the Greek experience didn't start things in the West. It really started in Africa, in Egypt. All of them went to Alexandria and got educated, and then they put their slant on it. Socrates is the fellow we look to. Socrates, in his quest for knowledge, invents what's called a Socratic method. If you use the Socratic method, many of us do, but we don't realize we're using it. But if you use the Socratic method, I use it in class all the time. When I'll ask you a question, you give me an answer, I usually twist it a little bit and say, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? I've got to show a little video. Hopefully it won't be delayed on the internet, and he'll explain what the Socratic method is, and then I want to talk to you about it for a few minutes.
So a lot of the times we hear we should question authority, but how do we question authority? Well, Socrates gives us a method. He gives us a method called the Socratic method, which some people call the method of dialectic, and there's other names for it too. But this Socratic method is when people get together, or you can do it alone too, but people get together to discover truth, not just to debate, not just to defend their own opinions on issues, but to work together to discover truth. It's not rhetoric, it's not debate, it's something a little different. So let's get into this. The Socratic method is a way of thinking, actually, that involves 3 steps. First, you give a definition for a concept. The second step is you find exceptions to that definition and you present them in the form of a question. And then the third step is you give a better definition of that concept. And you just keep going through these 3 steps. Now, step 2 could lead to the following. You could give a perfect definition of the concept or your opinion or whatever, and that would end discussion. We now have knowledge. But in many cases, we'll end the discussion without fully understanding the concept. That is, we'll end in what Plato called aporia, in rational ignorance. But at least we'll know why we don't know. And we'll also have eliminated some insufficient definitions. So let's use a concrete example to illustrate this method. Let's say we ask a child what is a triangle. And here's step 1. The child says a triangle is a shape. So we have a definition, step 1. Now, in your mind, you might be thinking, well, this is not a sufficient definition for triangle because there's many shapes that are non-triangles. For example, circles and squares. And in other words, this definition of triangle includes too much. It does not exclude all non-triangles. So thinking of this, you ask the child the following question. Well, a circle is a shape, is a circle a triangle? And now the child has to say, oh no, a triangle is not just a shape, it's a shape with 3 sides. So now we have a more refined definition. We can and we're back at step 1. And we keep going through this process until we get to the perfect definition of triangle. And notice how challenging this way of thinking is. I can recognize triangles, but it's really challenging to sufficiently define them to discover the essence of a triangle. But according to Socrates, I don't really understand, I don't really know until I can give such definitions. So the consequence is that we know very little. I mean, to better understand why we know so little, just try giving a definition for justice or goodness or truth or beauty or love or circle or something like a fish. I mean, if you ask me what is a fish, I'll give you a definition, but it won't be the perfect definition. It won't, on my first try at least, it won't exclude all non-fish and include only fish. So now, what I just said, many people will respond and say, but concepts like justice are simply opinions. There's really no truth about them. So the Socratic method just can't get at truths about justice. However, I think the Socratic method is still valuable if that were the case, because it helps people discover their real opinions about justice. So for